Welcome to the Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 Long-Term Water Supply Workshop number 2. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Chan.
Here.
Director Linney.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson is on his way. Director Young.
I'm here.
President Katz.
Here. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment on non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
I have no hands online for public comment.
Okay, we will proceed to the workshop. General Manager Chan.
Good morning, board members. So today's workshop is a continuation of our first workshop that we had on February 28th. We're going to review our water conservation goals with respect to the state's long-term framework. We'll provide an update on our progress with working with the state on the voluntary agreements. And we'll share changes to the Los Vaqueros expansion project schedule and details on we'll provide updates to the board, planning and finance committees, as well as the full board. I'm thinking we'll take questions at the end of each section, and then we'll have time to take questions at the very end of the presentation. We have 4 speakers, starting with Linda Hu, who is our Manager of Water Supply Improvements. Linda.
Thank you, Clifford. Good morning to members of the board, Chair Katz, General Manager Chan. So today's program is part 2 of the long-term water supply workshop.
Just one time and click one time with the mouse, and then you should be able to.
Okay. Oops. Let me go back. Okay, so this is agenda of the workshop. So workshop number 1, which was held in late February, we covered the workshop goals and objectives, as well as challenges and supplies. We also covered a portion of the water supply portfolio update, focusing on key topics. And for the part 2 workshop today, we'll continue with the water supply portfolio update and wrap up with next steps. So today's speakers also include Mike Toglini, Director of Water and Natural Resources, Charles Bullock, and he is our new Manager of Water Conservation, as well as Grace Su, Supervisor and Supervising Engineer of Regional Projects. So here's a quick recap of the workshop number 1 that was held on February 28th. For that workshop, we had covered Freeport and potential wheeling principles, an update on the recycle water program, as well as update on our groundwater projects, including Dream and Bayside. We also covered the Los Vaqueros Reservoir, although today you'll also hear an update of the schedule for that project later on during this workshop. And for the first workshop, we also covered information on advanced metering infrastructure. So workshop number 2 today, we're here to cover the remainder of the water supply portfolio update, as well as new updates, and that includes water conservation, an update on the voluntary agreements, as well as a schedule of updates for Los Vaqueros. And for each of these 3 sections, what we'll do is we'll pause at the end of each section to take questions at that time, and then at the end of the workshop, we'll also take questions as well. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Charles for an update on our water conservation program.
Thank you, Linda. President Katz, members of the board. I'm Charles Bullock, Manager of Water Conservation. So as Clifford mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the long-term framework, and that's the legislation of making conservation a way of life in California and the water use efficiency of those 4 components. And then I'll kind of finish up with meeting those requirements. So some of you have kind of seen this graph before. So there are 4 components of this legislation. So there's an indoor component, so how efficient customers are in their indoor use. Then the next one is called the landscape area measurement. That is the efficiency outdoors for single-family customers. And then we have a section which is the commercial, industrial, institutional, CII, and dedicated irrigation meters, and then water loss. So those are the 4 drivers of this legislation. The reporting's to begin in January of this year, and it's kind of a reminder that water utilities are allowed to invest in any of the 4 components to meet the full target. And my next slide, I got a graph that kind of shows how this kind of goes together. Then the little box that I have on the right-hand side, so the legislation was passed in 2018, and then all the requirements were to be adopted by the State Water Board in 2022. That is kind of coming past on that one. And then in 2023 that's when we were supposed to calculate what the target is, which we're in the middle of that process right now. And then 2024 is when we start doing the target. So what are we above it or are we below it per se? So right here is a kind of a graphical look at it. So as you see, kind of on that top row of that box, the standard base budgets for the water use efficiency. So underneath that, and but I'll be talking more in detail on my next slides about the indoor side of it, the outdoor, the CI landscapes, and water loss. So we're going to get a number for each one of those components, and that'll then be added together for our standard base budgets. There are also a couple of variances and bonus incentives in this legislation. So the variance would be if we had a lot of horse properties, which we don't, or if we had seasonal population. So we don't really have a lot of variances in this legislation to be able to change our budget a bit. And then bonus incentives, that one is right now it's pretty much focused on potable reuse, which is something that we do not have at this time either. So the four that I kind of mentioned are going to essentially be driving what our target is. And I kind of want to mention that the target's going to be unique for each water agency. There's around 400 water agencies in the state of California that this will affect, and each one will get a different number or different target that they have to achieve. So the water use objective, so that first column, those are the components which are going to drive our requirements for it. So that, you can see the single family, the indoor standard, the water loss, single family landscape area measurements, and down as it goes. So the legislation was created, then they handed it off to the Department of Water Resources, and DWR is then to take that, and they're supposed to be kind of like a feasibility. It's supposed to do research on it. Does the legislation make sense? Is it achievable, etc. So far, DWR has taken all of that and made their recommendations and sent it on over to the State Water Board. And the State Water Board has adopted 2 of them so far. And like I said, in subsequent slides, I'll go over that. So the indoor standard is set, as well as the water loss. The other ones, which, the last 5 on there, current target is winter 23-24. So about a month ago, the staff at the State Water Board made their recommendations to the board itself. And so it's going to be under consideration, and there will be additional stakeholder groups that EBMUD will definitely participate in. So far, EBMUD has been an active member in all DWR meetings, as well as the State Water Board meetings, as well as Aqua, etc. So the indoor standard. So when the legislation came out, that's that center column. Let me start on the far left. At the particular years, you had to make a target. So in the years 2020, 25, and 2030. So the original legislation was in 2020, you had to be at 55 gallons per person per day, and then by 2030 down to 50 gallons. So this past year in 2022, Assembly Bill 1434 changed that, and it went from 55 to 47. Now our target is 42 gallons per person per day by the year 2030. And I just kind of remember that we have all 4 of these components that are going to be put together for our target. So you don't necessarily have to make every single component. It's a cumulative of the 4 of them. So kind of giving you an idea. So in the winter 23-24, our single family indoor use is around 51 gallons per person per day. Now, we know that number might be a little bit high because there's always incidental use going on outdoors. People forget their irrigation systems on, but that's kind of the best number that we were kind of ballparking in right off the bat. So to kind of give you an idea for this particular target, because it started out at 50, moved down to 52, that'd be an 18% reduction. That means around 8 to 9 gallons per person per day of savings. And if you total that up with our population of 1.4, that's like 13 million gallons a day that we'd have to meet just on this particular component. One thing that did not happen during the rulemaking process and the adoption of it is variables such as telecommuting was not taken into consideration. And as we presented before the Water Conservation Office, we know that our service sector, office buildings, a lot of the water use that was people going to work Monday through Friday has shifted back to the home. So that's a little nuance, but it's a reality. Outdoor recommendation standards. So this is the next component, and the numbers and the goals are very similar for both the residential and our commercial sector. And so I'm going to start off with ETF, which is all over this legislation. And it's kind of, to put it in simple terms, it's a plant factor. How efficient is a plant with that water? So like grass is at around 80%, a live oak might be at 30%, a flower garden or vegetable garden could be around 75%. So kind of giving you an idea of how efficient plants are with that water. So the residential and CI standards kind of following each other. So from the year 23 to 30, we have to be below 80% ETF. So how efficient our customers are with that water on their landscapes. And then in 2030, it drops down to 63. So we've got a little bit of a glide path. So kind of put it into, another perspective. For if you're using 100 gallons, you've got to cut that down by 37 gallons on your landscaping. So that's an achievable goal that we're going to be okay with. The State Water Board did make a recommendation to extend the legislation out to 2035, and they would then put single-family residential at 55% plant factor and commercial at 45%. So that kind of follows the MWELO. So the next bullet, new developments. East Bay MUD has been working with our customers that come in for new water service and making sure all of their plans for their landscape and their plant palette are designed to make that 55 for residential and 45% for commercial. So we've been watching that. The 45% has been a bit of a challenge for the commercial sector to meet. The MWELO is very prescriptive, and so there's a pretty big learning curve yet for the people that are actually maintaining these landscapes. So one other component in this, so we've got how efficient it is with plants, is how much landscape does East Bay MUD have out in our service area that we're irrigating? So our full service area is around 322 square miles. So then we get how many square feet do we have out there that's being irrigated, and how efficient are we with that? So DWR has provided to all the water utilities what that landscape area is. So essentially how much area is being irrigated in your service area. And that number falls very comfortably with when we did. So East Bay MUD, off our last legislation, which was 20% reduction by the year 2020, we did this water budget sort of process. And so we did our landscape area measurements for our service area by ourselves in 2010, 2015. The number that we got from the Department of Water Resources is right in line with what we had. So we're very comfortable with that. On the commercial side, it's around 745 million square feet, plus or minus 5%. But I'm pretty close to that, Ms. Young. But on the commercial side, DWR is not providing that. So water utilities have to come up with how much commercial area they have irrigated. One thing that East Bay MUD has done fantastic on for decades, we've been requiring dedicated irrigation meters for any sort of landscape out there that is of a big size. So we've got almost 5,000 dedicated irrigation meters. So that finding out how much is actually irrigated out there in the landscape, we're in good shape. Other water utilities got like 5 years to adopt it. In my next slide, I'll go into a little bit of a nuance to about mixed-use meters. One moment. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So then the next component is that CII standard, the Commercial, Industrial, Institutional. So the first part of it is going to be the reporting of your businesses in those various sectors. Now, the state has come up with 19 different categories. East Bay MUD has what we are internal BCCs, is our business classification codes. We've got 82. So we've got a little bit of a crossroads to do to put those 82 different type of businesses that we have in our commercial sector into 19 and start reporting on that. The State Water Board has also proposed that we start converting that water use data and and inserting it into the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That would be a little bit of a duplication because we already do this for our commercial customers with our WaterSmart software and our web portal on that one. So that's a little bit of a nuance on that one. So getting back to those dedicated irrigation meters that I was mentioning just a slide before. So there are sites that don't have dedicated irrigation meters, and I'll use schools for an example. They have a mixed use meter. So for those particular sites, we've got some compliances, and recommendations from the state is you can do water budget based rate structures, which EBMUD doesn't have, but we do have the other tools below that. So we do have incentives for smart irrigation controllers for these sites. We use our WaterSmart software to be able to give them ideas of how they are in water budgets, and then we provide site surveys. So going back up to that middle bullet, so DWR recommended that all of sites that are over 1 acre of landscaped, that if they don't have a dedicated irrigation meter, then we have to do in lieu of sort of technology. The State Water Board has kind of changed that and said any site that's more than 500,000 gallons a year. That one's a little bit more of a challenge for the simple fact that from satellite imagery, you can see what you can measure an acre. It's relatively straightforward. That 500,000 gallons a year with 1 meter at the site, you don't know if that's going indoors or outdoors, a cooling tower, part of their productivity, say it's a bottling company and making soda pops or something of that nature. So we're going to keep an eye on that one to see kind of where that one lands. Water loss control. This is one that's already been approved. EBMUD was very active in this. We did host State Water Board staff here, worked with UC Davis on this one. So the performance standard is going to be 44 gallons per connection per day. We're currently at 33 gallons per connection per day. So this one, we're in wonderful shape on this particular component. So kind of giving you an idea, where is water conservation right now? So some of you remember this graph. So when we did our demand study and looking out to the year 2050, what were our conservation goals? So I've got a couple little dots on there. So the last time we gave this as a big update was in 2018. We were at 46 million gallons per day of savings. In the year 2025, we do have a pretty good confidence level that we're at 50 million gallons per day because our customers are very good and they've been very responsive when we've asked for water savings participation. And we're on that kind of glide path to achieve 60 million gallons a day. Where that fits in with the long-term framework and the target, unfortunately, it's very difficult since there's two of the driving components are still under consideration. But by all paths forward, we're continuing with our conservation programs. And we believe that we'll be able to definitely achieve 60 MGD by the 2030. One thing that makes it a little bit challenging is these last couple of years of drought. What's a rebound? We didn't see much of a rebound after the last one. Will our customers continue to use water efficiently? That's a lot of our work right now, is helping them maintain those efficient sort of behaviors. As kind of like following up the state says, making conservation a way of life. In that. And I think that was it. So the water conservation trends, indoor conservation is becoming very commonplace, very saturated. Kind of my last bullet there, it's become very prescriptive in the state of California. You can only buy a high efficiency toilet, a shower head, an aerator. All that you see is if you go for a clothes washer is a high efficiency like side loader. So a lot of that has been taken care of. So it becomes now on behavior as well as outdoor efficiency and looking for leaks. Those are going to be a lot of them that we're going to be working with our customers to help hold that consumption down. And the trend is turned into real-time sort of data, helping people understand when they're using that water, how they're using that water, communicating with the customers if we have smart meters, that if they're irrigating 7 days a week, they're going to be a good customer for us that we can talk to and help them manage that resource a bit better. And we continue working with our water budgets and our home water reports. So here on this particular slide, just kind of a recap from this last year, we did I'll kind of use my mouse right here. These are our home water budgets. They were very instrumental in us communicating to our customers. We now have like 250,000 of our single family customers in the program, and we got an open rate of 65%, which we think is a really, really good number of emailing to our customers. And one thing's nice, we were able to adjust this messaging on a pretty regular basis during the drought. So with when messaging came out for the drought getting, stage 1 to stage 2 or different restrictions that we had, we're able to use these water reports to communicate that to our customers. And in 2022, we delivered 4.4 million messages, and to still have a 65% open rate means our customers really are pleased with what we're communicating to them. And then we're also going to be working on, right here's a little graph of our single family water budgets. And so going backwards for a moment, so the My Water reports now do kind of a social norm, comparing you to people in your community of like houses, like populations. We're going to start to kind of use some of EBMUD employee customers to convert on over to a water budget, which would be based on more your landscaping at your house and how many people are there. And what this does, it helps reinforce that long-term framework, the two components, the indoor side of it, as well as the outdoor. So how efficient are you with that water? So that'll be something that we're going to be working on over the next year. So kind of in summary, the long-term framework does accelerate our savings goal from all the pre-calculations that we can see. Kind of as a reminder, that 42 gallons per person per day, if that would be just the one driver, that's 13 million gallons just in that sector alone. But fortunately, we can use all 4 components to meet this this target. And the residential, outdoor, and commercial are still under consideration. So like I said, we hope to know more this coming winter. And one thing about this legislation, it is going to unfortunately cost a little bit more money because our customers are going to have to convert their landscaping. We're going to have a robust conservation program with tools and technologies and incentives on that, because we need to keep this water use low and continue to push that down a little bit. So that was all that I had for my presentation. Were there questions I can take?
First, I see Director Coleman and then Director Linney.
Great,
We'll go down the row, and if I skip Director Chan, you may enter also.
quick question, Charles.
Sure.
Quick presentation. That slide before, number 17, I guess it is.
Yeah.
You talked about with 65% open rate, and your comment was, we know they really like it. How do we know they really like it? I open things all the time. It doesn't mean I like it.
Oh, thank you. So we do surveys of our customers that participate in our Water Smart programs. Like, do you appreciate the leak notifications? And we've got like over a 90% say, thank you for this messaging. We really appreciate it. So we get a lot of comments on a regular basis, and there's a little leap of faith, but I'm assuming they'd let us know otherwise.
Got it. Thank you. The last question I have. In the very beginning, you talked about how we need to achieve the goal that's being set. What is it based on? Is it based on from the state previous usage? Is it based on geographic usage? Yep. What is it based on?
Okay. So at the staff meeting a month ago, the State Water Resources Control Board staff made presentations. There was a fair amount of comment from the water agencies because that target of what that year was moved between slides. And there's comment from the board members as well as the water agencies is that we need to stick with a number which is a non-drought number. So a lot of the water utilities like 2018, because if you have to say if they pick the year 2022 of a drought year, that suddenly your goal is based on that would become very challenging. So Director Coleman, that's a great question. That's something we asked as well, is that you can't, please don't move this target on us. Please pick a number and stick with it. And we want a non-drought year.
We want a non-drought year.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Probably on wet year too.
Yes. Yeah, we want a normal year. Yep.
I'll just insert on some of the comment that I had echoing Director Coleman's just discussion around the 65% open rate. I'm sure Director Linney will have some professional insight onto that as well. My interpretation is not necessarily that the whole open cohort likes our messaging. I'm sure that many of them are looking for a bill or something mandatory for them to see. But what it does tell me is that we have trust. And that we're not over communicating, we're not overusing our microphone to talk directly to our customers, and we do have to be careful to maintain the trust. But it tells me that we haven't. It's an exceptionally high rate for this type of communication. I'm not sure about industry standards, but it is really good, and I'm really glad to hear that we have our customer trust. And if we did have the opportunity to get more insight, it sounds like we've gotten at least a portion of the customers really like the messages. I almost wonder, is there another channel that they would want to get more messages, from us for that? We would even be, restrained from, losing our customers' trust with more messaging. But I think that that's probably accomplished through linking to social media. I think people who want more messages can link to there, and but it might tell us that we shouldn't be shy about helping customers find more messages through our website and other social. So those are my thoughts on that, and I look forward to insight from professionals who have done this too. I'll come in on other issues that don't overlap, but I just thought since it overlapped with Director Coleman, I would insert there. Director Chan?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions about the outdoor watering. You commented that we were going to actually, some of the customers are going to have to convert their yards, right, in order to meet the new guidelines
Yes.
for watering. So I just wanted to ask if that's so, and people have to convert their lawns, is there going to be additional subsidies for people to do that?
Yeah, we have a pretty robust lawn conversion rebate program, and actually a suite that we offer our customers. So in addition to converting their landscapes, and we financially incentivize them that, we've got drip irrigation conversion, sub-meters, pressure regulators, high efficiency nozzles. So we've got kind of a whole suite of offering that we will help these customers, in addition to resources and self-help. So and I want to be kind of clear on this one. So no one's going to be necessarily forced to, like, my landscape that I have. And I've got turf in my yard, and I've got kids, and they still play on it. And at some point, I'm going to be tired pushing that lawnmower, and they're not using it anymore. So this number is for a community, or for our entire community. And so the water consumption with turf is a fair amount higher than a native plant. And so we're going to have to continue to work with our customers to get rid of those ornamental sort of landscapes, like when people have just grass in front of their house and it's not being used for anything, like the only time the person's on it, they got a lawnmower in front of it. And also working with, the state's also got legislation going through what they call non-functional turf. And that is turf that is a little piece of grass on the corner of a gas station, which is just there to be there. Mm-hmm. So going after those sort of, and working with those customers to get them to participate in our programs and convert that landscaping.
Right. And I think the square footage right now, it's $2.50, right, per square foot of the subsidy that we would give customers. Is that correct? Or no?
That is correct.
Okay. And then so I guess what I was hoping to hear from you was that the state was going to offer an additional subsidy to us to help our customers, but that's not what I'm hearing.
Not yet. We will. Our water conservation group is always really good about looking at any particular grants that are out there, and so anytime that we can actually boost that, we jump in with both feet.
State working on a program that they might provide funding for customers for lawn replacement?
Yeah, there's it hasn't been set, and there's a lot of legislation that's kind of going on at the same time. and they're trying to figure out how this works in with disadvantaged communities, as well as non-functional turf. And so, Clifford, you're right, it's out there, but
The details aren't there yet, but the
Correct.
state is also working on a program with details yet to be seen.
Okay. The second question I had, again, about outdoor watering is about people who grow their own food, like I do.
Mhm.
And I have 19 fruit trees. And so I was just wondering, are there any exceptions in this water policy for people like me who, and I really try to help feed the neighborhood. So,
yeah. So as I mentioned, this target is a community-based target. So the customers that we're going to be really working with are those non-functional sort of pieces of landscaping, that turf that are out there. So we support people to grow their own food, have their fruit trees. It's good for the environment. It's good for the community. It's a win-win
it really is.
situation. But it's, our effort and our target is going to be, once again, like the word ornamental. It's very tough to say, oh, this is 10 feet by 20 feet. Everybody knows what ornamental or non-functional turf is when you see it, but actually to try to describe it or have it written is a little more challenging. And then we also want to be respectful for certain communities don't have a lot of play area for kids. And so those are areas that we want to make sure that there's still green space for people to go on out and enjoy.
Okay. My last question is, so given our abundance of water this year, is your department going to be, driving conservation, talking about conservation as much as you have in the last few years? I mean, I'm having a problem telling people that they should conserve and then yet saying that we're out of the drought. I mean, it's kind of contradictory.
Yep.
If you're moving to a level 0 restrictions, so.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback a little bit what Director Katz was saying before. So with our home water reports, we do switch the messaging based on the water needs and what we're trying to achieve. So right now, during these times, as I mentioned before, we try to lock it on in. So what we do is we switch a lot of our messaging to community events, demonstration gardens. We talk about our incentive programs, and these are the times when we do have extra water for customers to convert their landscaping because the soil is moist, the plants will take a lot better because it's not as much of a struggle, and it puts them in better shape when the next drought comes. That's one thing about California or West Coast Mediterranean climate. As soon as you get out of drought, it's just a matter of time before you get back into your next one. So this is our time to we can breathe a little bit easier. But now this is a great time to convert your landscapes.
I see. Thank you so much.
And I'll just quickly add, I think the state also recognizes the challenge of these climate extremes. And so they're moving away from the drought emergency to talk more about a climate emergency. And they have a Save Our Water campaign, which is the overarching message for all utilities to make conservation a way of life, so that just because we're out of a drought, we're not out of a climate emergency. And so we need to continue to save water. So that's the messaging between the state and the utilities that we're trying to reinforce each other to continue to tell customers to save water.
Director Linney?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the water loss control slide 14. What makes up, remind me, I guess, what makes up the water loss? Is this just water loss on our side of the meter, or does it include water loss at residential level?
I have my resident expert here to step in for me. Casey?
Good morning. So those water losses are on the district side of the network. So anything upstream of the customer's meter from our treatment plants.
And that's measured basically from the difference of what we're actually billing customers and what we're producing. Is that right? Is that how it's measured?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And the 44 gallons per connection per day, where does that number come from? Is that set from the legislation, or is that our own performance standards? Or
California Senate bill required utilities to submit water audits annually. And so the state has taken the district's annual water audits and come up with an average for 4 years. And so the 44 is the district's average for 4 years of those. And so that will be the district's performance standard that we have to meet in 2028.
And Oh, sorry, Casey, maybe just to expand on that one, just to talk about, because we can't measure the leaks in the system because we don't know where they are, it's a difference, as you said, of what we provide and what our customers use. One of the efforts to get this number down is also look at the accuracy of our meters. And can you talk about that a bit, Casey?
So we're tackling the largest inputs and outputs to the distribution system, and so we're improving meter accuracy from our treatment plants. We're going to replace water treatment plant flow meters, so we have a better understanding of the water entering the distribution system. And then for our largest customers, we're annually verifying their flow rates with an independent device, and so we're making sure we understand the largest inputs to the distribution system and the largest outputs to the distribution system so we can make sure that we're on the right track for our projects to comply with regulation.
And the 44 gallons, again, just to get a handle on that, that's now our performance goal, because that's what or do we have a better one that we're shooting for to keep it under what the state's requiring?
The regulatory performance standard is going to be 44, and that was adopted in October last year. The district will continue to implement an aggressive water loss control program. CIP budget includes additional devices and additional staff to get our water loss lower. We don't have a specific numerical number, but we will continue to strive to meet the performance standard that the state gave us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Director McIntosh?
I continue to harp on this, back to our messaging, and we're missing so many people in HOAs. We've talked about sending information to management, but it never trickles down to the actual homeowners. When I get information from EBMUD in my packet, it's an exciting thing, but none of my neighbors receive that same information. So they don't even have an opportunity to participate. So it's a huge number of people that we are just missing with our messaging. And I know there's a way, and I'm certain Clifford and staff will help figure that out, because it's just been going on, and it makes really no sense. If we're serious about water conservation, everyone should get the message.
So, just quickly, so from your experience, because we've been outreaching to the management at the HOAs, that message is not getting down.
It's not trickling down at all. And it might be received by board members, but I mean, there are many units, townhouses, condos. No one's receiving that information at all. And number two, I mean, what about gray water catchment? I mean, have we determined, maybe we have, how much it would cost to offer some sort of simple system to folks? And so they can water their own gardens and trees and plants. I'd like to see going forward in the future, is there just a simple catchment system that we can offer our customers? Anyway, going forward, I'd like to see that opportunity. That's it for me.
Can I have a follow-up on that?
Mm-hmm.
Gray water, or just to make sure?
Rainwater.
Okay, I heard
Yes.
gray water.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
rain.
Because I know we already have a gray water program, which is to be able to help people with a three-way diverter, and we got a lot of resources, which is a fantastic way for people during droughts to be able to irrigate pieces on their landscaping, because you just oftentimes take that clothes washer and just
Right.
Put it on out there, and that's really good about for trees, but for rainwater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, it's back to HOAs. I'm in an HOA. I don't have that information at all. I'm not privy to that information. And most individuals, families living in HOAs don't even know about our website. Something that simple, to go in and check out our website. People just don't have, HOAs don't have those, that information to even begin doing their own research. So anyway, I harp on it, but it's very important to the district.
And we can provide some more information on the rainwater capture. It's, you know, when and why it doesn't make a lot of sense, because we have a very distinct wet and dry climate. So as people put a, say, you know, a rain barrel, unless you're going to build a large cistern in your system, which is very expensive and you know, consumes a lot of space, you know, you're going to fill that barrel one time. Spring's going to start. It's going to get dry. You're going to water it. 55 gallons will go away very quickly, and you spend a lot of money to convert your system. When you look at the cost of the other actions that we're taking, it's more cost effective per gallon than to have everybody have their own gallons, just because it just doesn't rain late spring, summer, and fall.
But, you know, we just had a deluge, and, you know, it just wouldn't stop raining. People could have filled God knows how many barrels over that period of time. So it might not work for the entire year, but it could very well work for a portion of the year. So anyway, but I would love more information on that, Clifford.
We could provide more details on how that evaluation was done.
Okay.
Maybe particularly as we have these more extreme storm likelihoods, does that change the math? You know, the math was very disappointing to me the first time I saw those, you know, cost effectiveness calculations. Maybe the weather extremes change things somewhat. So I'd be interested in seeing just how the numbers look again. Director Patterson, we've been going through the workshop slides. Do you have anything to come in on, or would you like to wait?
I'm bothered about a number of things. There are people that, as Lisa points out, that we're not communicating in HOAs. There are also people in multi-unit structures living there that are not getting our message as well. And I guess the press to conform with a standard that's being set by the state, which keeps pushing water use lower. There's a problem that I think we're not addressing. And that is, as it goes lower, our costs don't go down. Bottom line is, the ratepayers going to pay more for a lot less. And we better be mindful of that, because we're not the only sheriff in town. The energy producers are going the same route, just for distribution in some cases. And that tariff is going up. We also have two of my concerns. One is for the older member of society who's done everything right all the way through, and in retirement has resources. And there are programs now that focus on those resources as a baseline of charge. That's where energy is going. I keep looking out to say, we're charging, in some cases, for meters that are above the level of the consumption. So some of these things have to be cranked into the stream, because when new people come on board, you don't fit them for the low level, you fit them for the standard. And you see, costs a lot of money to build a house from the water side. Costs a lot of money from all the utility sides, for that matter. So there's a drive that's, I've been in the business of helping people down the road better and making us sensitive to that. Gentrification has done a lot to get rid of some of the people I was helping. If you look at the federal standard now that they're going to in terms of construction, any of those, environmental justice is on the table. And they're aimed at helping some of the constituency that I have that I'm concerned about. What I'm more concerned about is that because of the absence of application during the Trump era, we now have a backload of money in the environmental side. And they're pressing for all construction to be considerate. And this money is available. It's not money that has to be appropriated. It was never spent, so it's still sitting there. And our agency is one of the ones that's fortunate enough to join in with that as we do our infrastructure, which is our big suit. I think in looking at some of the results of people questioning is that these monies were intended for people who are no longer in that sector. I was saying a meeting that people were coming to that they expected to see a lot of African Americans in, saw a lot of Asians. Properties changed hands, or the location or the renter has changed hands, because some people have been pushed out. And so that money is still coming there, but not for the ones intended. And the ones intended are being pushed out further. Some say they've left the state. Our state's losing population. And my real concern is that the whole picture be seen as it is now, and make sure that we're not a step behind in our planning. Planning's supposed to be out front, but we're a step behind in the application. Some of the people I've been talking to recently, some who are well-to-do, and they now look at something called social action, is to look into and see how they can help people who are caught in this transition, and in the hope to bring help to them, because they didn't all go back to where the cheapest living is. And if you go to some of those sectors that used to be cheaper, they're going up. So while we're addressing this from East Bay MUD standpoint, and for our constituents and for the people we support, we've got to look into all of those areas in terms of understanding some of the people we're going after are not in the loop. And some of them are fighting so hard for other things until they don't even see how they're being drowned. But all costs are going up. Medicare, they said it's coming down, but it's going up. See? And if it's all based on how you are set up financially in your planning for your future, it's being undermined by people mining that future that you plan to live in certain comfort. It's not going to be very comfortable. And so I just bring this to your attention. You shouldn't have called on me. It's the wrong time for me to be talking.
We got your insight, and yeah.
I have a lot of time, and I look at the Environment Channel. I look at everything that pertains to what I think has an impact on people I represent. I understand Ward 2. You see, I have a lot of residential persons who do have property, and that property is not as large as Walnut Creek in some of those areas, but it's similar. I have people with swimming pools that can't use them most of the time, but they have to maintain them. You know, if they don't, they'll pop out of the ground. So a lot of things are going on for people, and they ask me questions. I'm not a genius. I don't have the answer. And sometimes I tell them, I'll find out how you might be helped. It may not be my agency, but there has to be some place to send them to where they can get relief. And at the same time, within some of our wards, there's gentrification of people who are losing their homes, you see? You got all that going on at the same time. And it seems to be to push people out of housing more than to bring them into housing. That's in conflict. And when you talk about building, I call them the granny units. And that's coming into focus now. Because there's some people don't want that in their neighborhood. You know, they won't tell you that, but they'll fight you on it. Zoning and all of that, as we try to fill the needs of people, we have to bring us all together. If there's any example that I can use, it's one that April and I just witnessed. You see? And we saw people who aren't there yet, but are headed down that same road. And I saw people that I worked with way back when we passed Measure K in the city of Oakland. $60 million to bring us into the 21st century. Well, we're going on a couple of more now. And that money, some of the things that it created and did are still impactful for the residents of the city. But people didn't build on that. And so you have the same gap. And you have to come in with something else to boost them up and keep everything relative. An example, this one I'll give you, Lake Merritt. I work with Sierra Club and every environmental group in this city, cleaning up Lake Merritt. The cross-section of the sewer system and the stormwater runoff channels coming out of Piedmont went into Lake Merritt. And so you had different elements there, the smell, all those people who lived around there were impacted. The widgeon grass, all the stuff that grew in there. And we worked with EBMUD, we worked with everybody to get that lake cleaned up. Got a grant from the federal government to study it, got a plan, implemented the plan, and cleaned up the lake. More recently, we saw the result of not following through, not maintaining, not keeping things going. And all those fish that were turned up there dead, and the size of the fish told you that it was once healthy. You see?
So Director Patterson, we are we're going down the road, just taking questions on.
I know, and I said you shouldn't have called on me.
We have two more segments of the workshop to go through, so I just want to make sure we can move forward.
Conclusion by saying, I'm putting some things out there for you to look at and think about, because it's bigger than just a paper plan. We're talking about people and their lives and where they fit. That's what has to be. The element that isn't there when you go to a state body and they're setting standards and stuff, they don't see the people. They see the water or whatever it is that their authority covers. I'm through.
Thank you, Director Young.
Yeah. I have a couple things. I'll try to be concise. One is on the issue of those that don't get, a water bill, can't benefit from the home water report or the rebates, is that it's not a problem that's just isolated to East Bay Mud. And I'm wondering if there's legislation in the conservation as a way of life mode that could apply to people that live in multifamily situations, including, HOA or HOA type developments, as well as rental units. Because I don't, I think that we need more than may need more than a bully pulpit to get those things moved down. I do, while I appreciate, certainly my ward, straddles both extremes of water use in our district, that I do think that as we continue to focus on how to support our high water users to use less, by giving them incentives, that as we think about those who already are using less and continue to use less without any of those incentives, that we think about how properties, people that may be adding vegetable gardens where they hadn't had irrigation, that maybe they should get more of a, maybe, there's something to incentivize efficient water use as people are installing irrigation versus using simply soaker hose. Maybe we give a rebate for people that use drip irrigation in their, vegetable plots, even though they never had irrigation, because our program only rebates people who are removing, turf and an irrigated landscape and replacing it with more efficient. And that could then also extend to, right now we give a $50 rebate for installing the two-way diverter on the washing machine. Maybe we can rebate people for their entire gray water system if they present receipts, versus just the diverter. And perhaps, if somebody can demonstrate you know, if somebody decides they want to do rainwater catchment with the big cistern and all of that, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we should necessarily, you know, that we should cover their costs, but perhaps we could give them the same, if they can demonstrate the square footage that they're not irrigating as a result of rainwater catchment, maybe, you know, that goes a bit of the direction towards helping. And it may only help until, you know, July 1st. And after July 1st, they've got to put, you know, they have to put, so I think maybe there's a more, it'd certainly be more complicated to figure out, but if somebody can demonstrate that their, you know, rainwater system is basically saving water that would have otherwise come out of the spigot, then perhaps there's some kind of way that we can, you know, address that. I totally understand and appreciate the difficulty or the, you know, the cost effectiveness of rainwater catchment in our climate as being complicated. And I have many discussions with a certain friend of mine, you know, about this. But I do think maybe there's some more direction that we could take in that regard. I'm also interested in do we have a target for how many? So we have 250,000 single-family customers right now who are getting the home water report. That's what, 20% or something like that of our, or no, how many single-family accounts do we have?
Around 330.
Okay, so we're at like 60%
Yeah.
Saturation.
And it's growing because every time a customer signs up for new water service from East Bay Mud, we send them like a little welcome packet. So it's continually growing.
Okay, and is it an opt-out?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
they're in it unless they.
Yep.
Okay, so it's just catching those customers that are old, basically longer-term customers who haven't caught on to.
Yeah, we're working all the time to get additional contacts, you know, and unfortunately, somebody that has been paying their bills for 30 years at the same house has never called us and said like, oh, I got a new email or a new phone number.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
And then last question on the water budget program. How are people being selected for that? Is it a certain size of plot or?
Oh no, we're looking for volunteers on this little pilot. So if
so people can sign up regardless
Absolutely.
of how much, you know, if
Yep.
they have a
Yep.
5,000 square foot lot in Oakland, they
Yes.
can sign up regardless of whether they're.
Yeah, it's at the
It's
the
really
bottom
hard.
one.
And my last comment is that bigger pictures, less print on slides.
I
Because
realize
it's
that.
really hard. Even the printouts are really hard to see what's on there.
Yeah, when thank you.
Okay.
I'd like some more information on how people, what we're doing to get people to sign up for that.
Okay.
I'll try to run through my comments a little quicker. You know, in terms of getting information out, I think that's been raised by most of my colleagues here. I was just thinking about, you know, as we're trying to design various tools to help our customers reduce their water use. We need to comply with state mandates. We are trying to accomplish a balance where, you know, as the state encourages all water utilities in California to meet these targets. We've already been doing a great job. We may face the day that we look average compared to our peers, but for now we're doing a great job, and we do want to stay at the head of the pack and still be a leader. And you know, one of the frontiers of exploring, and it's great to have state programs that allow us to have that flexibility. We, it's good that we're ahead because we don't get caught into a type of one-size-fits-all regulatory process that, while it may be necessary for some of our peers, we can benefit from having flexibility as we reach for that next tier of conservation. But like Director Patterson said, we do want to take into account the social context and how different customers are in different settings, and how do we meet people where they are, and be aware as we engage a suite of tools. So I'm thinking about that in terms of the presentation today. And one thing that occurred to me is as the idea of having a separate meter for large landscape is a great one. We've been doing it for years, but I do wonder if could we even bring that threshold lower for the right circumstances. I don't think we would do this all at once for no reason, but as we look years ahead from now. Would it look different if we had the flexibility to include incidental indoor use? So if we were able to confirm that an irrigation meter maybe did serve mixed use, but the indoor use was of such a minimal threshold that it really was an irrigation meter and it should be priced as irrigation rate. And the customer would always have a choice of having separate meters, but we do charge a flat fee to have a separate meter. So I'm just raising some of those things. I'm conceptualizing this as being able to capture more irrigation only use and being able to charge it and assess it at an irrigation type of rate. But expanding that program if we incorporate an incidental irrigation use. It's just a thought, as we look at tools in the long term. I think the idea of where we go from here on landscape conversions is interesting. In a non-drought year, we don't really have that moment. It feels like drought years are really a teachable moment for converting your lawn and landscape. So that's not this year. But I think that element was a highlight of our drought conservation savings and should remain a high priority of our overall program going forward. So even though we didn't hear a lot about it, I still hope to see it high on the long-term budgeting and things.
Yeah, it's still our probably our best tool to help our customers at this point in time, and we're going to continue that because there are a lot of landscapes that can benefit for a conversion.
Yeah, and of course the gardening, especially trees that Director Chan raised, not really appropriate for just a simple conversion. It's not quite the same. We don't really have a conservation program that works for that. Although what Director Young suggested around drip is really interesting. I think some further feedback about whether a proactive installation would result in conservation compared to a customer who waters with a bucket and pail. Does that save water or not? I think that would be really interesting to hear more about. For these gardening applications, the board has really never heard a lot about the prevalence of medium to large size gardening in our service area and what our approach is to it, because we should appreciate it, but we also want to see conservation as a way of life. So what does that look like in terms of our incentives that we offer and in terms of our long-term pricing that we might do? And how could we avoid problems, equity problems, perverse incentive problems through some of the tools that we have, either reliance on messaging or sub-meters or the pricing, those sorts of things. So those are some long-term thoughts. I don't think that these are simple thoughts that we could just integrate into an enhanced rebate. These are really integrated ways of integrating tools that we could be more creative with. So I talk about it really broadly, and I don't expect a response on this sort of thing in the near future. I second the thoughts about having an enhanced communication plan for HOA residents and residential tenants. It seems like that could be added to our list as we do equity and community-based CBO outreach. That, you know, we're talking about the CARE program, the CAP program, and this would be, I think, an important area to engage the same community on is, you know, what could we do better to engage, particularly the residential tenants. I think HOA has a different kind of outreach strategy to it, but we might find similar tools that come up in that outreach. So I second engagement and, you know, some focused engagement for that kind of outreach. And my last comment is I found it really interesting. I got served a social media ad on Earth Day for a third-party automated metering device, and I am interested if they were serving the ad. I'm not going to mention the company here, but I noticed that the district's logo was on the ad, and I am interested. I'm seeing eyebrows. Maybe that's an unlicensed. What?
No, it's the flume.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I wasn't.
Rebate for it.
Yeah, I expected that we have a program, and I just wasn't sure. Certainly, we have a rebate program. Our rebates were very prominent in the ad. It looked like a very useful kind of product, but I just wasn't sure how we're engaging with use of our logo, if it was licensed or if it's you know, how we make sure that we're having customer protection as we encourage third-party products to be out there to accomplish our public goals. So that's a request for additional information on that.
Okay, noted.
So thanks for the feedback. We will get back to you probably in a memo on all this. We can move on to talk about the voluntary agreements.
Yeah, and I think we have very few slides on voluntary agreements. It is an important presentation to get updated on. I would suggest that our next, you know, conservation was an interest of the whole board. I would suggest that we keep our questions after voluntary agreements to a need to ask basis, just so we can move along with our meeting day.
Or alternatively, we can just take questions at the end of both the voluntary agreements and LVE all at the same time. I think it's
why
relatively
don't we lean
short.
towards that? If there's really a challenge understanding something that was presented, I'll call for questions at that point. But if it can wait, let's wait until the end. Let's take it away, Mike Togolini.
All right, thank you. Good morning. The board has been mailed the packet, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. It's very text heavy in these slides. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights, so in keeping track of where we are time-wise. The Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan regulatory process is what we're talking about when we say voluntary agreements. And the state board is updating its water quality control plan. It's supposed to do that on a regular basis. The previous versions were 95 and 2006. And this time they've identified two separate phases. Phase 1, which represents the San Joaquin River and tributaries, and then phase 2, which is the Sacramento River and tributaries, and they've included the McKellamie River in phase 2. Phase 1 is a little further along than phase 2, but we are, phase 2 is the place where EBMUD has been engaged in terms of the voluntary agreements. A scientific basis report was released in 2017 that I recommended an unimpaired flow approach for to regulate flows from the tributaries, and that approach would be detrimental to the McKellamie River fishery, especially in terms of temperature management. The alternative that is proposed by water agencies and the state administration is the development of voluntary agreements to improve water quality with a combination of flow and non-flow measures, those non-flow measures being primarily habitat improvements and restorations. So what is the status of the voluntary agreement? A valley-wide memorandum of understanding was signed in March of 2022. EBMUD signed on to an amended version of that MOU in August of 2022. And at this point, the water agencies and state administration are negotiating a set of agreements that describe more completely the science plan, the governance, the strategic planning effort and reporting related to those that voluntary agreement MOU, including a tributary specific implementation and enforcement agreement. All of those are under negotiation currently. The agreements would be approved by the water agency signatories in 2024, and an upcoming major milestone will be that the state board will be releasing its environmental document, and that's scheduled for June of this year. And that environmental document will describe both the original unimpaired flow approach as well as the voluntary agreement approach to meeting the regulatory need. Just very quickly, the McKelvey VA is a combination of flow and non-flow measures. The flow measures result in increased flows in the spring in dry, below normal, and normal and above JSA year types. There are no increased flows in critically dry years as a part of the VA. And the habitat side would include 25 acres of new floodplain restoration, 1 acre of rearing habitat, some fish screens, and maintenance of our existing in-river habitat. And then there would be a financial contribution that East Bay MUD would make for additional water purchases that would support additional flows into the Delta. These are the fundamental principles that staff is using to guide our negotiation of the agreements, and they include no harm to McKelvey fish, equitable contributions from all the key parties, local governance and control, no refill criteria for regulatory flows, reasonable flow accounting, regulatory certainty. This is an 8-year agreement, and then the question is what happens after that 8 years. So we're trying as best we can to understand what that next step will be after the 8-year agreement has expired. And then support from our McKelvey stakeholders, all the other water agencies and diverters on the McKelvey River. So our next steps are to complete the negotiation of these voluntary agreements. The state board, as I mentioned, state board environmental document will be coming out in June. And then we are continue to provide regular updates both to environmental NGOs as well as to our McKelvey River partners and stakeholders. And with that, I'm going to introduce Grace Sue, who's going to talk about Los Vaqueros Reservoir schedule.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Good morning. I'll just spend a few minutes here to provide you an update on the schedule for Los Vaqueros. We received earlier this month an updated proposed revised timeline for the agreements from the Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA. The big sort of change in the schedule is the extension of the timeline for negotiating and executing the agreements. It's been extended about 6 months to March of April 2024 from the fall. It was originally anticipated the last time we presented, the fall of this year. This slide here presents the 7 agreements or sets of agreements that we will be negotiating over the next year. At the top is the next amendment to the cost share agreement, also known as the multi-party agreement. That will be the 5th amendment, and we will be covering that in detail in 2 weeks, actually, at the Planning Committee on May 9th. So that's needed because of the term of the existing agreement. Cost share agreement will be expiring in June of this year, and additional funding is needed before the service agreement is executed next year. Below that, MPA number 4, I just want to highlight are actually three of the agreements that will require board consideration prior to approval. There will be the backstop agreement that will be between CCWD and East Bay MUD, the East Bay MUD agreements between East Bay MUD and the JPA, and the service agreement between the 8 member agencies and the JPA. So because of of course, the intense level of activity that's expected over the next year, we have provided the schedule in the last 2 slides of the board briefings that will be needed to get to the point of considering those key agreements. And as mentioned, on May 9th, we have the MPA number 5, along with updates on the projects. Also, on May 23rd, we will be going to the Finance Committee to provide funding updates. And you'll see, you can review the rest of this on your own, but I do just want to highlight what is highlighted on these last 2 slides, which are the board meetings where the board will be considering the various agreements. So in August, the board will be considering the multi-party agreement amendment number 5. And then on the last slide, we have the 3 other agreements that are under consideration. There'll be the backstop agreement that is shown in December, but that's actually going to get pushed to the spring, along with the EBMUD agreements and the service agreement for considerations. And so those are really the key agreements. If we do decide to participate, we do want to wait for that springtime to bring those for consideration. But there's a lot of discussion. We want to get the feedback from the board over this next year on all these agreements and the project updates. And with that, I will turn it back to Linda to provide the next steps.
Thank you, Grace. So this is our very last slide for the presentation. We're going to wrap up with the recommended next steps, which are listed here. So we'll continue to evaluate wheeling proposal with partner agencies. We'll continue to conduct recycled water studies and do the strategic plan update for 2024. We'll develop groundwater supply strategy and conduct community outreach, as well as address and communicate district issues in Los Vaqueros project negotiate agreements. You just saw the schedule laid out for board committee briefings coming up in the upcoming year. And continue to advance conservation efforts, exploring alternatives to full AMI deployment, as well as continue to negotiate the voluntary agreements. And with the water supply portfolio, we'll develop the funding strategy, looking at state, federal funding available, looking at partner cost-sharing opportunities, et cetera, and we'll certainly seek creative solutions. So with that, we'll open it up. There's time for additional board comments as well as public comments.
First, I want to just get a clarifying question on the Los Vaqueros issues. So we have members of the board have expressed some concern about when are we going to get the quality of studies that help us determine the benefit for Los Vaqueros. We got on slides 28 and 29 some a long list of when different committees of our board are going to get updates and when some of these agreements are going before the full board or before the JPA board. But when in this timeline does our board get some report back on studies that we need to make appropriate decisions?
Yeah, so the studies will be updated as part of that as well in advance to making the decisions. We'll be providing studies update at each of these committee meetings as well.
Okay, so it's kind of pieces of it happen at different points in the timeline?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I do think it's, given that we don't have a board member directly sitting on the JPA, I think it is important to keep this active on our committee agendas so that we're able to stay in frequent communication about the issues. And, I think having those studies has been really important. So with I can take the temperature of the board. Do we want to get it out there with our questions and comments on the most recent segment? I haven't called for public comment yet on the workshop, and it might be nice to hear.
I just have one quick.
Director Chan?
I know that, well, according to this chart, that the LV project funding is going to be before the Finance and Administration Committee on May 23rd. So I was just going to ask you if you can get information to this committee, well in advance. Just so I would like to have some extra time to review the information.
Do you know when the information will be available, Mike, that we could actually share the information?
Information in advance of the committee?
Yes.
So we certainly have.
It says LV project funding.
Yeah, so that's an LV project funding update we'll do as part of that committee. So funding updates relating to, the topics that you see listed there. I would just want to say that we also produce monthly meeting summaries from the JPA meetings, and those do include some funding updates as well. So those do come out on a monthly basis, and they're included in the board packet.
Okay, but for whatever we need to look at on that day, I'm just going to ask you if you
Yeah,
could please
you want
give
it.
me.
It sounds like you want it in advance, information in advance.
Yeah, just a few
Okay.
extra days to review. That's all I'm asking for.
Frankly, the funding arrangements seem, fairly straightforward. Just because it's a larger capital project, we might have some unique dynamics. But we've
Yeah.
funded big things before. We've funded big things in partnership before. I expect the reports going to the planning committee to be more complex, and I do find it a little interesting how we will, and I defer to colleagues on the planning committee who will be the front lines of receiving these reports, but I find it a little interesting that we'll be discussing the proposed agreements, but I'm not clear on the stage of reporting for studies that would support, the wisdom of entering into the agreements. So that's we're still, Los Vaqueros is part of our WSMP. We're very interested in this partnership, but we just need to know what our study plan
Yes.
is.
So I'll give you an example. For the planning committee, for example, that LV project update, multi-party agreement, we'll give you an update on the study of water supply sources as well, right? Because we didn't list it there, couldn't fit all the text in there, but those study elements will be included. And Director Chan, I just want to point out where you see the LV project funding, you see we're going to the finance committee a few times, so that won't be the only time we'll get an update.
I
We'll
understand.
give you an overview, but we'll certainly look into getting the advanced information.
Yeah, we have very short meetings right now, as you know. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate the comment.
Comments from other directors on the voluntary agreements or the Los Vaqueros updates? Okay. All right. Let's take public comment on the workshop. As I mentioned, please, if you're, I see a speaker here, and if you are on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. I'll take online comment first. Are there any hands online?
We have no hands for public comment.
All right, seeing no hands online for public comment, I will call in-person public comment. I see Yvette Rivera.
Is this for this meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's actually for the comments that Director Chan just made. I've been to quite a few meetings, and it really feels like every time that Director Chan makes a request for information, that people chime in a, to me, disparaging way. She's a brand new board member. She's trying to do due diligence, and all she is asking for is requests for information. I don't think she's allowed to meet with employees at the district to get more information. I think this is the venue for her to do that. And as a ratepayer, I would appreciate it if she received a little bit more respect when she asks for requests for information. That's all I have. Thank you.
Seeing no further public comment, just last chance for anybody online. We will then close the workshop, and thank you to all staff and board who contributed. Thanks.